Imagine, if you will, an empire so vast, a dominion so expansive that the sun, in its perpetual journey, never ceased to shine upon its lands. It was a realm where daylight always reigned, a testament to its sheer size. At its zenith, the British Empire held sway over nearly a quarter of the Earth's landmass, a staggering proportion of our planet. This colossal empire governed the lives of over 400 million people, a diverse tapestry of cultures, languages, and traditions. This was far more than just a collection of territories on a map. It represented a complex, interconnected global system, intricately woven with threads of power, trade, cultural exchange, and political influence. And remarkably, this entire global network was directed and controlled from a relatively small island, nestled off the coast of Europe. The British Empire's reach extended to virtually every corner of the globe, from the vast open plains of Canada to the arid, sun-baked deserts of Australia, the bustling, vibrant markets of India, and the far-flung, isolated islands scattered across the oceans. Britain held dominion over critical shipping lanes, ensuring the flow of commerce and resources, controlled access to vital resources across continents, and commanded a seemingly inexhaustible reservoir of soldiers and laborers to fuel its ambitions. But the question remains, how did a relatively small nation, situated on the periphery of Europe, manage to achieve such unparalleled global dominance? The answer lies in a complex tapestry woven from the threads of intrepid explorers, ambitious merchants, driven by profit and opportunity, zealous missionaries seeking to spread their faith, and the unwavering might of the Royal Navy. The empire's expansion unfolded over centuries, a gradual process of growth and consolidation, sometimes guided by meticulous planning and strategic design, but often driven by unforeseen circumstances, sheer luck, and opportunistic exploitation. Its legacy, both positive and negative, is indelibly etched upon the world we inhabit today. From the arbitrary borders drawn in the halls of power in London, which continue to shape international relations, to the pervasive influence of the English language, now a dominant force in global communication, and the enduring impact of economic and political systems, many of which were directly shaped by the long shadow of British rule. Therefore, to truly understand the complexities of today's interconnected world, we must embark on a journey to uncover the dramatic rise, navigate the complex reign, and examine the eventual fall of the British Empire. The story of the British Empire doesn't begin with grand armies marching across continents or formal declarations of conquest. It began in a much more clandestine and arguably morally ambiguous way, with privateers. These were state-sponsored pirates, individuals like the infamous Sir Francis Drake, who were given license by the English crown to raid Spanish ships laden with gold and other treasures plundered from the New World. They were essentially legalized thieves, sanctioned to disrupt Spain's dominance. These early daring exploits, filled with risk and reward, taught the English a crucial lesson: that immense wealth and significant power lay across the vast oceans, waiting to be seized. The allure of the New World was too strong to ignore. Soon, the English ambitions shifted. They realized that simply raiding and plundering wasn't a sustainable path to long-term prosperity. They transitioned from raiding to settling, establishing a permanent presence. This led to the founding of Jamestown in Virginia, a pivotal moment in British colonial history. It was here that tobacco, a highly sought-after commodity in Europe, became a lucrative cash crop, fueling the colony's growth and attracting more settlers. The drive for land and resources led to further colonization, spreading rapidly to the Caribbean islands, each offering unique opportunities for exploitation. In the Caribbean, sugar plantations flourished, driven by an insatiable demand for the sweet commodity in Europe. However, this prosperity came at a horrific cost, powered by the brutal enslavement and exploitation of Africans, who were forcibly brought to the islands to work the fields. This system of exploitation gave rise to the infamous triangular trade, a complex and deeply inhumane network that spanned the Atlantic. It began with British manufactured goods being shipped to Africa, where they were traded for enslaved people. These enslaved people were then transported across the Atlantic to the Americas, enduring unimaginable suffering and brutality during the voyage. Finally, the ships would return to Britain laden with sugar, tobacco, and other valuable colonial goods, completing the cycle. This system, built on unimaginable cruelty and exploitation, generated immense fortunes for British merchants and landowners, and it funded further colonial expansion and solidified Britain's growing power. This first iteration of the British Empire was fundamentally Atlantic-centered, its foundations firmly rooted in the interconnected systems of trade, colonial agriculture, and most tragically, slavery. Crucially, Britain's powerful and ever-growing navy played a vital role in protecting its trade routes, enforcing its colonial claims, and projecting its power across the ocean. This combination of naval dominance and a ruthless drive for profit, often at the expense of others, set the stage for the even greater global empire that was to come. These early, often brutal and ethically questionable steps taken in the Americas and the Caribbean, while morally reprehensible, laid the essential foundation upon which the future British Empire would be built. The empire's roots, therefore, are inextricably linked to the pursuit of profit, the accumulation of power, and the often violent exploitation of both people and resources. In India, the British arrived as traders, not conquerors, through the East India Company. For over a century, they competed with other Europeans for India's riches, spices, textiles, tea, negotiating with the Mughal emperors. As the Mughal Empire weakened, Britain and France vied for influence, backing rival princes. The turning point, the Battle of Plassey, 1757. Robert Clive's cunning victory gave the company control of Bengal, India's richest province. The company transformed from traders to rulers, governing millions and collecting taxes. Corruption and exploitation soared, and the wealth extracted from India helped fuel Britain's industrial revolution. Over time, the company expanded its rule through treaties and wars, but resentment grew. In 1857, a massive rebellion erupted. Though crushed, it ended company rule. The British government took direct control, and by 1877, Queen Victoria was Empress of India. India, the jewel in the crown, became the empire's financial engine. The British Raj was born, an empire within an empire. The Victorian era marked the golden age of the British Empire. Fueled by industrial power and a belief in their own superiority, the British expanded rapidly. The scramble for Africa saw Britain seize vast territories from Egypt to South Africa, often through violence and technological dominance. In Asia, Britain annexed Burma and Malaya and forced China to accept opium imports. White settler colonies like Canada, Australia, and New Zealand became self-governing dominions, loyal to the crown but largely autonomous. By the late 19th century, the empire was a global system directly ruled colonies, dominions, protectorates, and spheres of influence. The Royal Navy patrolled every ocean, and London was the world's financial capital. To many, the empire seemed eternal, a divinely ordained order. Yet even at its zenith, the seeds of decline were sown. The empire's complexity masked growing instability. The British Empire was an economic machine, powered by trade, finance, and technology. The Industrial Revolution gave Britain a head start, but its factories needed raw materials, cotton, wool, rubber, from the colonies. The empire provided both resources and captive markets, often at the expense of local industries. London's banks and insurers financed the global network, while steamships and railways shrank distances and moved goods and troops. The Suez Canal shortened the route to India, and undersea telegraph cables connected London to the world. Railways and telegraphs allowed for rapid control and extraction, not local development. The empire's technological edge bound its far-flung parts into a single system. This closed economic loop enriched Britain, but often devastated colonial economies. Trade and technology made the empire global and deeply unequal. Behind the empire's carefully constructed image of glory and progress, a darker reality lurked. It was a legacy built upon systematic exploitation, oppression, and violence inflicted upon countless people across the globe. The true cost of empire was far from the triumphant narrative spun in the halls of power. Wealth flowed relentlessly to Britain, enriching its coffers and fueling its industrial revolution. This wealth was directly extracted from the back-breaking labor and abundant natural resources of its colonies, often with little to no compensation for the people who toiled endlessly. Local industries, once thriving centers of innovation and craftsmanship, were deliberately suppressed to benefit British manufacturing. Colonial economies were fundamentally restructured, molded to serve British profit, ensuring a constant supply of raw materials and a captive market for British goods. The human cost of this exploitation was immense. a tragedy unfolding on a vast scale. It manifested in forced labor under brutal conditions, the imposition of heavy taxes that crippled local communities, and devastating famines, like those in India, exacerbated by British policies where millions perished due to starvation and neglect. Violence was not an exception, but a routine tool of control, used to maintain order and suppress dissent. Rebellions and uprisings born out of desperation and a yearning for freedom were invariably crushed with extreme brutality. Consider the 1857 Indian Rebellion, a widespread revolt against British rule, or the Amritsar Massacre, a horrific act of violence against unarmed civilians, and the Mau Mau Uprising in Kenya, a struggle for land and liberation met with fierce repression. These were not isolated incidents carried out by rogue elements, but systemic methods of control, sanctioned and implemented by the colonial administration to maintain its grip on power. Yet, despite the overwhelming power of the empire, resistance was a constant undercurrent. From local chiefs who refused to bow down to colonial authority, to charismatic leaders like Mahatma Gandhi, colonized peoples found ways to fight back against their oppressors, sometimes through armed struggle, risking their lives for the cause of freedom, and sometimes through the power of ideas, challenging the very foundations of colonial rule. Non-violent movements, particularly in India under Gandhi's leadership, inspired countless others across the empire to demand their own liberation. The story of empire is not simply one of conquest and domination, but also one of extraordinary courage, resilience, and unwavering resistance in the face of overwhelming odds. The struggle for freedom was a long and painful process, marked by sacrifice and hardship, and ultimately, a testament to the indomitable spirit of those who refused to be subjugated. The empire's legacy is complex, a tapestry woven with threads of both oppression and remarkable resilience. Its eventual end was shaped not by the benevolence of the colonizers, but by the unwavering determination of those who refused to be ruled. Even at its height, the British Empire was fragile. By the early 20th century, rivals like Germany and the US were catching up, and defending the empire was costly. The Boer War exposed military weaknesses and damaged Britain's image. World War I was catastrophic. Millions died, and the empire was left financially and morally shaken. Colonies demanded more autonomy, inspired by their sacrifices and new ideas of self-determination. Britain tried gradual reforms, but nationalist movements grew stronger. World War II delivered the final blow. The fall of Singapore shattered imperial confidence, and Britain was left exhausted and bankrupt. The US and USSR opposed colonial empires, and the world order shifted. The stage was set for rapid decolonization. The empire's end was now inevitable. After World War II, the British Empire collapsed with astonishing speed. India and Pakistan gained independence in 1947, amid violence and mass migration. The wind of change swept Africa and the Caribbean. Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Jamaica, and others became independent. Most transitions were peaceful, but some, like Kenya and Zimbabwe, saw bitter conflict. Colonial borders, drawn without regard for local realities, left a legacy of instability. By the late 1960s, the empire was reduced to a handful of territories. The final act came in 1997, with the handover of Hong Kong to China. Britain sought a new relationship with its former colonies through the Commonwealth, a partnership of equals, not rulers and subjects. The imperial era was over, but its consequences endured. Decolonization was both a triumph and a challenge for the new nations. The British Empire is gone, but its legacy shapes our world. English legal systems and parliamentary models are imperial inheritances, but so are many global conflicts and inequalities. In Britain, the memory of empire is contested. Pride for some, shame for others. Immigration from former colonies has enriched British society, but also brought struggles for equality. The borders and economic structures left behind have fueled conflict and underdevelopment in many regions. The story of empire is one of power, ambition, achievement, and injustice. Understanding this history is essential for building a more just future. The past is never truly past. It lives on in the world we've inherited.